everyone, and welcome to another Taco Tuesday. Today is the 10th episode, so we hit double digits. So I hope that everyone is having everyone had a wonderful weekend. A couple of shout outs for those who came a little bit early today. We have Chunlian, we have Jingpei, Puyen, Yongjin, Ayaka. Thank you so much for joining early and just chatting up a storm in the rooms. Just want to what are you guys drinking? I was drinking a coffee, but I drank it too quickly. So I'm left with cloudy apple juice. All I know is not from concentrate, so it's 100% pure, so it's really, really good. I'm not sure what you guys are drinking. Go ahead and just type it in your room to see what you guys are drinking out there. Just before we get started, one thing I want to remind everyone is, if you have a question at any time during the entire lecture, go ahead and just write it down in the room, right? Anytime you're just like, oh, I got to ask this question. And it does not have to be about today's topic. It can be, and it may not be. It is up to you guys. So anytime, go ahead and write them in the room. So what does this mean? It means it's time for us to get to our Taco Tuesday. So everyone, grab your drinks. Have a night. Some of you probably eating dinner. Grab your drinks and your dinner, and let's enjoy today's story about Timothy. Okay, so let's get into it. So there's a couple things you need to know about Timothy. Now, Timothy is not one of the 12 apostles. He's not someone you hear a lot about from Jesus or any of the 12. He's actually someone we only learn about from Paul, and Paul writes about him a bunch of times. So he's not one of those like special apostles, but he's made known because of what he did, and we find all about that in the book of Acts and also in the two letters that were written to Timothy. 1 Timothy and 2 Timothy are not from Timothy. It's written by Paul as a letter to Timothy. Okay, so let's get into the story of who is Timothy. First thing you need to know, his parents, his father is Greek and mother is a Jew. Okay, so Greek father, Jewish mother. Timothy grew up learning from his mother and his grandmother. Name is Eunice and Lois. Okay, and what happens is, when Paul goes on his first trip, he goes and he converts Eunice and Lois into Christianity. So they went from Jewish, they were Jews, and then they became Christian. And the good thing about this is Timothy also came to the faith at that time. The great thing about having both his mother and grandmother as Jews is he learned from like a very, very young age about the Bible, about the scriptures and all the different things, how to live a good life, right? So what happens next? After this, Timothy gets this great reputation, okay? And when he gets his reputation, Paul is really fond of him, and Paul takes him as his, like, this big tour group of people that are going around spreading the gospel, okay? So what happens is, not only does he take them on tour, he gets them circumcised. We'll talk about it a little bit later, but not exactly what it is. No pictures or no video. But he gets circumcised, got a great reputation. Everyone likes him. Trusted by Paul. Paul sends them on many assignments. They go on tours together, not like a rock tour, but like a big gospel tour. Later on in his life, Timothy actually becomes like the pastor of the largest church in Asia Minor, and that church is in Ephesus. Okay, so back then he wasn't called a pastor; he was the bishop of the church in Ephesus. Okay, trusted by Paul. Even Paul sent a letter saying, "I trust you to lead this church." Eventually, by the end of his life, what happens to him? Like many of the other apostles and disciples of Christ, he actually was martyred. So what happened was, a lot of the pagans there, they didn't like Timothy because Timothy was very powerful in speech, and he was really able to break down and argue why Christ was better than what they were teaching, right? So what happened was, the pagans purposely had this idol celebration, and they did it right in front of his church. Timothy came out on cue because they knew he was going to do that. He says, "Come on, guys, this is ridiculous." And then the mob completely went against him, and they ended up killing him at that time. And that's basically kind of some of the special things that happened in his life. So it's like, well, there's not a lot to learn from Timothy because he's like his parents. He had good, righteous parents. He learned from them, and then Paul liked them, good reputation. We don't even have that much. And if you were to count all the times Timothy was named in the Bible, it was about 28 times. And most of it's from Paul and all in his letters. Okay? So what we're going to learn today is three major things that we can learn from Timothy. What can we learn from it? Okay? What can we learn from Timothy about his life that will kind of affect ours? Number one, first and foremost, we're going to talk about is how you start matters. Okay, this is a really, really important point for all of us here. Now, what was the starting point of Timothy? And I touched on it just a little bit in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 15. And in that it says, and how from infancy you have known the Holy Scriptures, which means, remember what I told you before is, his mom and his grandmother, Eunice and Lois, were very fervent Jews, and they taught Timothy ever since he was young. So he was someone that knew the Scriptures. And one thing that people need to know, especially if you're a Christian, the entire foundation and basis of Christianity is from the Old Testament time. So just Timothy knowing that, remember, at the time of Timothy, there's no such thing as a New Testament. There is no New Testament at that time. All you had was the Old Testament. And he knew it really well ever since he was young, right? From his youth, he was raised by his mother and grandmother in the Jewish faith. He learned and was raised really well from his youth. Now, what does that have to do with us? Is a lot of the things you have to look at each other and our own lives is you have to also look at the way you were raised. Okay, we're going to first talk about you personally. How you were raised. For instance, your schooling, your education, your upbringing, your habits, the way your parents raised you. And these things are things that all make a difference. Let me give you an example that all of us have experienced before. We've all experienced this. How many times have you seen someone in their house, right? You go to their house and you see some kids are just raised very disciplined. Like the parents have punishments, the parents say you have to do this, they get upset about certain things. And then you have the other side, someone's upbringing is super spoiled, right? They get everything that they want. And you notice it in their life, the way they treat you. Like their expectations is that you're supposed to do everything for them because that's the way they grew up, right? How you grow up, how you were raised makes a huge difference in your life. So now you say to me, well, Pastor Sky, like that's only relevant to us, but we can't change it because we're already grown up. We're not children anymore. I'm going to take you to the next level, right? I'm going to take you to the next level, meaning what? This also applies to everything that you do in your life too, right? Everything that you do in your life is similar. This is why it's truth. Truth is across all lines and all levels, right? Whenever you start something, your starting point becomes a very, very important thing. The attitude you have when you start, the effort you put in, the mentality, all these things matter at the very beginning because it'll carry you through for the rest of the time you're doing something, right? All these mental things, the way that if you're positive or negative, if you're someone who puts in tons of effort, if you're someone who has a great mentality, that all makes a difference. That starting point makes a difference, and it affects you later on in that process, right? And this is why how you start really does matter. Just like in the large scale of your entire life, the way you were raised when you were a child makes a big difference to the way that you are right now. And when you look at smaller things too, you have to realize it's how you start makes a big difference too, right? Make sure you start well because these habits and the way that you do it will carry you through until the very end, right? What's my first point? How you start actually matters. That brings us into the second point. So what's the second point of the day? Second point of the day is called keep the core in mind. Okay? What does it mean to keep the core in mind? Now, one way to understand is this. Timothy was Jewish on his mother's side. But those of you know, if you really, really want to be someone who is considered a Jew, Jews are considered Jews mainly if their mother is a Jew. And that's one of the signs you could say you're a Jew. Not just the father. It has to be, the minimum is your mother has to be a Jew. So Timothy was considered a Jew. Okay? So Timothy was considered a Jew, but he wasn't circumcised. And that's a big thing for Jewish people. Now, here's where it's interesting because he eventually got circumcised. Now, we don't have to go into what circumcised is. All I have to tell you is, right? And the guys are like, right? So all the Jews got circumcised. However, Timothy wasn't circumcised, but right before Paul took him on tour, he got him circumcised first. And you got to get this, guys. He's like, you got to understand how old he is, right? He's like late 20s, early 30s, and he's getting circumcised then. Now, the reason why this is really interesting is because Paul was someone who advocated that it didn't matter whether you're circumcised or not. So then why would you circumcise? If you look at Romans chapter 2, verse 29, right? It says that, no, this is Paul speaking. A person is a Jew who is one inwardly, and circumcision is circumcision of the heart. It is of the spirit, not by the written code, right? So when Paul spoke about circumcision, he was arguing that, just because you're circumcised doesn't really make you a Jew, right? Really? But what if you're circumcised but you live like a non-Jew? But then you have someone who's not circumcised but lives like a Jew. Then who is more of a Jew? Is it really an outer thing or is it an inward thing? And what Paul advocated was, it doesn't really matter. But then here he goes and Timothy gets circumcised, and you're like, well, if you don't really care about the circumcision, then why would you even get Timothy circumcised, right? Why did Timothy get circumcised? Why did Timothy agree to it, right? Why? Because we go back to the title of this is what? Keep the core in mind. What does that mean? What is the core? What is the very core of what they're doing? Why are they going on tour? Why are they going around the world from church to church, evangelizing, edifying the church, educating them and teaching them? Why? It is to spread the gospel, right? And in order for the gospel to spread, you need people to listen, okay? So why would you get them circumcised? Circumcision wasn't a key point of Paul, and it was not a key point of Timothy either in their ministry. But it was a huge sticking point for the Jewish people that were listening to it, right? It was a huge point for the Jews, but not for Timothy, right? Which means this: if he wasn't circumcised, then all the Jews, they would already have a reason not to listen to Timothy, not to listen to Paul, right? It's another reason to bring up an uproar and say, we don't believe, how dare you? You say you're a Jew, but you're not even circumcised. So Timothy got circumcised for what reason? It's because it wasn't a big deal, right? The biggest deal, the thing that mattered more was, do they believe? Do they accept the gospel more than anything else? And this is the problem that a lot of us have in our everyday lives too, is a lot of times us and our friends, us and our family, whenever we're doing anything, we're always fighting or arguing or getting over these, we destroy ourselves over things that are not even the key point. Like, I'm going to give you a verse here in Romans chapter 14, verse 17. And it's a very, very good verse, because in here, this argument's about food, whether we can eat pork or not, whether we can live like this, which day do we find sacred? And Paul's like, the kingdom of God is not a matter of eating and drink. It's not about what the food you ate, but it's about righteousness, peace, and joy in the Holy Spirit. Paul was always sticking to the core. So in this case, if circumcision is not even a big point, whether you do it or not, it won't change anything. Then, because it's not even a core point, then they just did it. Why? Because just the fact of them doing it will allow them to reach out to more and more people. Why? What is the key? Like it says in this verse, righteousness, peace, joy in the Holy Spirit, and believing in the one that God sent. There is a core thing that they wanted and the core thing that they were doing, but they were not going to let something that was not important get in the way of something that is the core issue, right? And in our lives also, we have to understand is there's a lot of times we fight over things that are not the core. There's not. You have to keep the core in mind, or you're going to end up destroying your relationships with your friends, with your family, with your loved ones. You're going to end up destroying your school, right? Friends at school, or your schoolwork partners, colleagues, work. All these people, we're going to have such a hard time. Why? Over things that are not even the core. So don't lose everything over something that is not the core, right? Don't make great big fusses out of small points. Remember to always keep the core in mind. When you keep the core in mind, you're able to do and complete what you actually set out to do. Now, the last point I want to give today, right? The last point I want to give out today is about him living his life, choosing his own path, right? Now, what does this mean that Timothy took his own path? Like, what does that mean? Okay? Now, here's the thing. Just like many other people at that time, Paul was so widely respected. He was traveling the world. So many people loved him. So many people respected him. So many people wanted to just be with him and travel with him and spread the gospel, just do amazing things. And Timothy was one of the luckier ones, right? He respected and loved Paul so much. And on the flip side, Paul respected and loved him so much too. It was very few people that actually had this type of relationship that Paul even called him his son at one point. Not the literal son, but son as in someone, son of faith. Now, the interesting part, what I'm telling you now, is that he took his own path. Is that a lot of people do get caught up, right? They get caught up what does that mean? Getting caught up because you're so respecting and you it's not like idol worship, but like you hero worship someone. Like me, I hero worship my brother. So every sport he played, I played. Everything he did, I wanted to do, right? And you're like, oh, and I just loved my brother so much. Okay? Now, here's the thing. Even though he respected and loved Paul so much, he was still able to choose his own path. Where a lot of people make a mistake in what? People make a mistake in they hero worship someone, but then they want to do all the things that they want to do too. And they basically are following someone else's path, right? And it's very easy to do when you have someone who is such like a, whoa, they're so amazing. You have this, your eyes are twinkling whenever you look at this person. The one thing interesting about Timothy was, Timothy also, he got married. He had kids. Even when he was following Paul around, he even had kids, and he was still following Paul around. He got married, he had kids, even though Paul was someone who says he preferred people not get married if they didn't need to. And he was also someone, remember, we said he pastored a church in Ephesus. He was the bishop of the church in Ephesus. Why is that so different? He was someone that instead of just following Paul around, not getting married, just doing everything Paul does, even though he respected and loved Paul so much, he was still able to see his own path, right? He absolutely respected and loved Paul, but he was also able to separate his life, right? See, there are great people in your life too that you look up to. People like, oh, I want to be like that. I want to be like this, right? But the key is this. It's okay to be like people, but not do the same thing as them, right? Because you're not liking someone because, you don't really like someone because they're a doctor. You respect them because, like, wow, because there's so many doctors in the world, but you like this person so much. It's because of the way they think, their character, how they're a doctor. And that's what we're attracted to. We're not attracted to just the doctor part, right? If it's just attracted to be a doctor, then we should be attracted to every single doctor in the world. But we're not. We're attracted to, or we look up to this one person. Why? Because of the way they think, because of the way they do things, right? Being like people is okay. Wow, I want to be patient like them. Wow, I want to be someone who's just loving like them. I want to be someone who's kind like them. But it doesn't mean you take the same path. Why? All the paths that we take are different, right? And we need to be the ones that stick to, hey, what is the path that I'm supposed to have? Yes, we'll meet many great people in our lives, and those great people that we meet, there are going to be things that we're going to envy and say, wow, I want that. And yeah, it's good to take those things. It's good to be like them in those areas, but it does not mean you have to be in the same path. You look at Proverbs chapter 3, verse 6, right? Proverbs chapter 3, verse 6 is a very interesting verse. It says, in all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight, right? If anything else, the reason why people of faith are going towards God is because we're not trying to be like Paul. We're not trying to be like Peter. We're not trying to be like these people. We're trying to be like Christ, right? It's all up here, right? We're supposed to, in all our ways, submit to him, do what we need to do, and he will make our path straight, right? So we're not looking towards the person to do exactly what they do, but you have to realize, if there's 7.3 billion people in this world, do you know how many different paths there are in this world? There are 7.3 billion paths in this world also. And what we have to realize is sometimes we get into that trap of loving and respecting someone so much that we just start ending up taking the exact same path as them. We have to realize, hey, sometimes you take the same path, and sometimes your path is completely different, right? We have to be the ones that, like Timothy, even though we had a hero and someone to look up to and someone as great as Paul, we still have to be the ones that find our own path, okay? So when we look at all these are three different things that we looked at today. What was the very first one today, right? first thing we talked about was how you start matters, right? How you start. All the things that you do, not just when it comes to your life, how you start matters. The second thing that's really important is what is keep the core in mind, right? The core makes a big difference. Don't fall off the path, because the moment you start arguing or getting into trouble with these things that are very minor and not the core, this is when you get into a lot of trouble. And find the last but not least is what? Is taking your own path. Yes, there are people to look up to in life. God puts those people in our lives that we look up to them. But it doesn't mean we are them. We like these things about them, and we strive to be like them in that area. But you have to search and find your own path, and don't get into the trap of, oh, I want to be just like them, so I'm going to take the exact same path. A lot of times we end up taking other people's paths instead of our own. Okay, so I hope that this story of Timothy kind of opens our eyes a little bit more to what is going on. And those of you, I'm just really happy that you guys joined us here today. As you can tell, I'm still in my hotel, but today is my last night in quarantine. So this will be the last quarantine edition of Taco Tuesday. And tomorrow, starting from Thursday on the Bubble Talk, I'll be back in the studio. So we'll be able to see each other in the regular setting once again. So thank you for just joining us today. Those of you here for the first time, go ahead, click like on Facebook, and then we're going to put the YouTube link in there, because on YouTube we have every single talk we have ever had, which means altogether there's about 50 to 60 talks we have already. Right? So go over to the Espresso with Sky YouTube page, go and click the subscribe button and just smash the notification bell, and you will be notified through email every time we upload a new video or every time we go live, right? And those of you who would like to support our ministry, we are on Patreon also, so go ahead and click that link. You can support us on Patreon. And Saturdays, 1 p.m. every week, we have group Bible lessons, small groups, a little bit more intimate, and we go a little bit more deeper into the words. So we're going to put up a sign-up form there too. Fill in the sign-up form, and we'll email you the Zoom link. All right. So what does that mean? It is time for question and answer. So I'm going to give you guys a few seconds, a few moments to start typing away your questions, and we'll get into today's question and answer. So get a sip of your drinks and get yourself ready for it. Okay, here we go. So let's start with today's first question. And the first question is from, let's see, from John in Singapore. Okay, what does it say here? It says, I know people who start well but don't end well. So does starting well really help you to end well? Okay, so here's the thing that you really have to understand about the good thing about starting well. Starting well doesn't mean you will necessarily end well, right? Because it just gives you a higher chance. With the attitude, the effort, and the mentality you go into it, it'll help you to end well. Now, here's the thing. Sometimes you don't need to end. You're like, what? Then why would I start in the first place? Well, put it this way. Some things you're starting because you want to try them out. And the reason why you have to start really well is because if you put your full into it and you see that it's not something you really want to do, then you don't need to end. You can go somewhere else. But here's the problem. If you don't start well, you won't really know to the full extent whether you like this or not. Because you know, it's like when you half try something, you're not really gonna know how good it really is or how much it really suits you or not, right? And that's why no matter what, start it well. Sometimes you don't need to end. Why? Because it's something you don't really want to do. You realize, oh, this is not it. Actually, I don't want to do this. But if you don't start well, you'll never really understand how good it really is or how bad it really is, right? You know, when you do something really, really well, you get to see the full spectrum of it. When you do it mediocre, everything is the same. You like it and you don't like it. Everything's the same when you do it a medium sense. So you have to start well and you get to see the fullness. Oh, you know, it's kind of like eating a new sushi or a new fish. I don't know why I said that, but it's like this. If you only eat a piece of the fish, what happens? You don't get a full flavor. You have to eat the whole piece and you're like, oh, this is what it tastes like. Okay, so I hope that answers the question, John. Thank you so much. All the way over there in Singapore. Let's go over to the next question. It's from where? Next question from Seoul, Korea. It's from Cindy. It says, I'm not sure what it means to be like someone but not take their path. Okay, so I'll explain a little bit more in detail what it means to be like someone but not take their path. It's kind of like the example I gave is whenever you look at someone, you really, really look up to someone. It could be your older sister, it could be your dad, your mom, you could be a best friend, it could be someone, your teacher. There's lots of people that we can really, really look up to. Okay, so what are we looking up to? We're not actually looking up to the position, right? Because like I said, a position is just a position. If the position itself was that amazing, then every single teacher would be inspiring and you want to be like them. That's not true. Every single mother, do you want to be like every single mother? No, all mothers are different. There's so many different people out there in their positions. It's the position, it's the path that's not important. It is how they handle it. It's how they do it, and that's what we're attracted to, right? Like put on YouTube, look on YouTube. There are a gazillion speakers on YouTube right now, but the difference is, think about it. Why are we only listening to this speaker and not that speaker? Why do I like this speaker and not this speaker? Why? Because it's the person we're attracted to too. That person's like, wow, oh, I really like the way how this person speaks. Oh, this person's funny. Oh, this person's this person's that. And we look up to them, not for the position, but it's how they do the position, right? So what does it mean to be like someone? For instance, if it's like a teacher, you like how they really empathize with the students, right? Which means that you're looking up to, you want to be like them when it comes to empathy. Not like I want to be an empathetic teacher, but you look to the empathy that they, oh wow, I really look up to that. And because of that, I want to go to their class even more, right? So that's what it means to separate between being like someone, but not taking their path. Right? You can still be empathetic, but do your own path. You could be empathetic as an engineer. You could be empathetic as a pro athlete. You could be empathetic in so many different areas, right? So being like someone is looking at like, wow, I really want to be like that. And then from there, what's next is you use that in your own path, if that makes more sense. I hope that makes more sense, Cindy. Cool. Let's go on to the next question. Let's go to Hannah in Singapore. Hannah in Singapore. And the question is, what if your start is not something you could control, such as our childhood? How do you overcome the difficulties in such things? And if the start matters, are we at a disadvantage? And the answer is yes and no. Because there is an advantage and a disadvantage. Let's start with the disadvantage, because like you said, this is totally out of our control. Let's pretend our parents are totally spoiling us. That's totally out of our control. It is, right? It's out of our control. Like, oh no, my goodness, it's totally out of my control. They totally spoiled me. So it's a disadvantage because I'm growing up with a spoiled mind. So there's a disadvantage. Now, where is the advantage? Okay, and I'm not going to say that there's an advantage in being spoiled. I'm not going to say that, Hannah. What I'm going to tell you is this. The advantage is now that we know how important the start is, you can look back and see how you were raised and understand the things that you need to change, and or even understand why you are the person you are right now. The advantage we have right now is we have hindsight. So when people say things about us, we're like, why am I like this? You have to look back and say, that's why. And if you have hindsight to look back and see how you were raised and understanding how important the beginning part is, the advantage is you know what you need to change and what you need to switch, right? That is the advantage. A lot of times people don't know why, people don't know like what to change. But if you look back at your beginning, yes, it could be disadvantaged, but now that we're a lot older, we're more mature, one of the things we can do is we can change, which means what? It is a new start of how to change yourself. Remember, there can always be something what you call a restart, or you start again, which means now that I know what I was like before, it's time for a restart. And what that restart means, I have to start well with changing this part about me. Is it unfair? It's not really unfair because everyone is starting off in the same position, right? There's no such thing as unfair. It's not like someone. It's not like someone is picking and choosing for you. It's like, Hannah, you can go over there where they treat you terribly. That is unfair, right? That's truly unfair. But if we're just being born and everyone is, there's no one choosing who they're born and no one is choosing who you're born to. That's not unfair. And the thing that makes it even more fair is that everyone can change. People can change. And that if you know your beginning and you know your starting point, this is something where is your advantage where, you know what, I'm going to restart and I'm going to start changing this part about me. And you might want to start with one of my very, very first videos way in the past called The Bread Talk. And that one was about why is it so hard to change? And you can watch that one too. It'll help you out also. Cool. Thank you so much, Hannah, all the way over there in Singapore. And we're going back to Malaysia. This is Sharon in Malaysia. And she is asking, how should we handle people who like to make a big deal out of small issues? Okay, so great thing is if you already know it's a small issue, then let it go. Let it go. Because you know it's small, it's not a big issue. There's no point in it, right? They could be like, and you'd be like, all right, cool, let's go on, let's move on. All right, sure, let's go on, let's move on. Why? Because we know what the core point is, right? If it's not a big deal even for you, right? The only time it gets really difficult is one person's a big deal, one person's not a big deal, right? But if it is a small thing, and this person make a big deal out of it, and you know it's small, it's not worth it. It's kind of like your circumcision, right? It's like, circumcision is not a big deal. If you don't get circumcised, these people aren't going to listen to you. And they're probably going to have something against you. All right, let's just get circumcised. But you're like, dang, like, is it that easy just to get circumcised? Because that hurts, right? But what we have to realize is, if we already know it's a small issue, then let it be small. Let it stay small. The moment you react to it and you start, oh, why are you making such a big issue? Then what happens is, it becomes a big issue. You made it a big issue, right? But if only one side's like, oh, and you're like, okay, okay, yeah, it's fine. Oh, okay, and you move on, right? So it's good that if you recognize it as a small issue, let it go, right? And one thing I do, like, I know probably another question you're probably gonna ask Sharon is, well, if I keep letting things go and then he's just gonna this person's just gonna get their own way every time. So the best way to handle it is don't handle it while the issue is happening. Like, don't, like, you know, we'll say, you know, we know it's wrong when someone's like making a big issue out of something small. We're like this, man, why do you make such big issues of small things, right? And when we say it to them, they're gonna get more upset, right? So you let it go. And when everything is calmed down and everything is finished, you can talk to them when you're both kind of even keel in your brains, not so emotional. When he's not thinking about it that much, then you just kind of, at that point, you talk to them and say, hey, you know, this thing here, I was wondering, you know, you kind of talked about this and I understand what you said here, right? And I understand this too, right? However, you know, and you just start talking to them when things have calmed down, not when things are reaching this emotional peak where they've just upset you and you're like, why do you always make that? Right? Then it becomes too big, right? So best advice is, if they keep doing it, right? Or if you find them, they're always in a habit of doing these things, then when things are calm and when things are good, then you can talk to them about it. When you talk to them about it, then this becomes a very, very good time for them to really think about it deeply, right? And if I were to tell you, like, if there was like 2 or 3 pieces of advice or piece of information you want to put in that, if you want to put into that speech when you talk to them at a normal level, number one, first tell them exactly what they did, like the exact situation. Make sure that info's there. Hey, remember that time when you were a little bit upset because of this thing when we discussed about this? So now they know exactly what it is. One of the worst things people do when they talk to someone else to kind of calm things down is when they say things like, hey, you're always like that. And then, you know, then the person's like, what the heck, I have no idea. Then it doesn't feel, it's kind of like you're just complaining and nagging them. You want to give the exact specific situation. Hey, remember last week we talked about this, you were upset about this. So now they know exactly what you're talking about. Second thing is, make sure they know how you feel. This really made me feel small and insignificant, that I'm not important to you. And then the third thing is, you want to tell them that if it continues in a certain way, what's going to happen? Like, hey, you know what? If if you keep doing things in this way, I don't think that I can work with you. I'm gonna have a very hard time working with you, right? And you need these 3 pieces of information. It's very, very important for us to help people, okay? So Sharon, if it ever gets to the point you need to talk to someone, always put in those 3 pieces of information so it's very clear how you feel, what will happen, what are the consequences if it continues a certain way. Like, of course, you're not gonna say stuff like, I'm gonna hate you, but it's gonna be like, I'm gonna have a really hard time working with you, or I'm gonna have a hard time even talking to you, right? Because I get so upset also, okay? So those 3 things I would suggest. All right, cool. Last question of the day is all the way over there in the Philippines. This is from Hannah. Hannah in the Philippines, and the question is, any tips on how to deal with anxiety starting a new job? In my workplace, I'm the youngest and it bothers me not meeting expectations of people, okay? So first thing, yeah, totally understand. What happens is, what we're talking about right now is what you call the cycle of change. And it's a psychological thing, right? Anytime something new happens, anytime you're doing something new, right? The hardest part is because your mind, your frame of mind, everything about you is seeing something new, your mind and your brain is not very good at adapting to change like that quick when it's large change, right? Small change is easy, but large change is very difficult, and you are going to go through, and one thing I want you to understand is you are going to have this type of nervousness and anxiety in the beginning, and that is normal. So the first thing you need to know is it's not something where there's something wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you when you're in a new place, a new situation, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know anyone here. Oh, I'm so young, I'm this. And that's totally understandable, right? And you need to help yourself understand this is normal. Every person that goes into a brand new situation, no matter what, is going to be like, whoa, I have no idea what to expect. I have no idea what they want from me, right? So number 1 is know that it's okay to feel that way. It's fine, okay? So now you're the youngest, and it bothers you not meeting expectations of people, okay? So the thing I want you to do is, expectations is okay. That's okay too. Like, if people have some certain types of expectations, that's fine too. But what I want you to do is, I want you to take the expectations just down 1 notch. Just 1 notch, right? What does that mean? It means that if you look at just the way human behavior, or the way human beings, the way we are never good at anything from the very beginning, right? It's not like we pop out of the mom's womb and we're running in circles around our parents. It's not like the moment we pop out of our mom's womb, we're like, hey mom, how's it going? We can't talk either. We can barely even do syllables, right? What is it? We are beings of learning, which means it takes time. So what I want you to do is take the expectations down a notch, meaning you're not expected to be perfect. You're actually expected to make mistakes. You are. You're supposed to try it, make mistakes, and do it better, and make a mistake and do it better, and make a mistake and do it better. And this is just a normal process that every single person in the world will go through, right? It's kind of like the movie Matrix. I'm not sure if any of you guys remember that movie, but there's this jump. The first jump, you jump from building to building, and it's like everyone falls on the first jump. It's a normal thing. It's normal, right? So I'm not saying it's bad to have expectations. Expectations are fine. You want to do well. It allows you to put in more effort. It allows you to be more, have a good mentality and like get yourself going. It's when you go a little bit too high, then you get a little bit negative in yourself with every single mistake and such. And I'm saying expectations are fine. Just lower it down 1 notch, right? Just 1 notch. Like, hey, beginning, right? And if you want, just talk to people. It's like, hey, how long did it take someone to learn this? Oh, really? Oh, do people usually make this mistake? Yeah, people make that mistake, and you're going to hear it all the time. So it's a good question, Hannah, and I know the anxiety and the nervousness, what's happening. Don't worry. It's normal to be nervous and a little bit anxious, right? And then, being the youngest, yeah, it could be something that could be a benefit to be the youngest. Why? Because usually people treat the youngest really well. Usually they do, right? Oh, look at the youngest one, right? But also on top of that too, you actually have a major advantage, because if you're the youngest and you do really, really well, then it looks even better upon you too. There's a lot of ways to look at it, but 2 things is, it's okay to be anxious. Number 2 is, just lower the expectation 1 notch, right? Just 1 notch, and it'll be a lot easier, okay? All right, so that is the end of today's Taco Tuesday. Today is the 10th edition. It was a story of Timothy. I hope you guys really, really enjoyed it. And everyone have an amazing week. And we'll see you guys again either on Thursday for Bubble Talk, Saturday for the Bible study, or next Tuesday for the Taco Tuesday. Everyone have an awesome evening. Bye-bye.